Keith Ellis, what do you know about setting impossible dreams or impossible goals? Are goals like a wish? Keith is a strong believer in setting impossible goals. How comfortable are you with the term impossible? If something's not possible, is it still achievable? Is it still realistic? Keith's an author, he's a coach. We talk extensively about that. The term SMART goal is used oftentimes in business where something is simple, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. But Keith's not a believer in that at all. He likes to work in the world of impossibility. And I give a certain amount of pushback and try to really rein that in and what that means. I wonder what your viewpoint is on it, on setting impossible goals or on things that are impossible. Are they truly unachievable? Or is just getting to a certain part of that impossible goal, maybe not the full extent of the goal, is it still victorious in your eyes? It's an interesting conversation with Keith Ellis. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because I was working way too much. Before you know it, I found myself 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People think there's some secret. Ask me, how'd you lose that weight? Like there's some secret. There is no secret. How'd I lose the weight? Just one word, discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends, colleagues convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission, how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Very excited to talk to you, Keith Ellis. Thank you so much for your time. What's your favorite question, Keith?
My favorite question is, what are you going to do about it?
Hmm.
And I don't mean that as a challenge. I mean, life, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune are going to dump on you, right? And you can bitch and moan and whine about it, or you can ask yourself a question, and it works in every circumstance. What am I going to do about it?
Trying to think of an instance where that wouldn't come into play. I can't.
No, it's the universal question, and it focuses you, instead of focusing you on what's happening to you, it focuses on what you can do about it. Changes your life. It's at the heart of discipline. I know that's near and dear to your heart, but that's really what it's all about, right? Gee, I feel like crap. I'm not going to go work out this morning. What am I going to do about that? I'm going to go work out. I mean, it just changes everything.
Yeah, it causes reflection. It causes a moment. It's very introspective. That's very interesting. And because often I find I have good friends that I know, and they often get stuck in trying to control things they can't control, Keith. Very frustrating.
Yep.
I mean, how do you combat that? What are you going to do about it?
No, that's it. I mean, we all listen to bitch and moan sessions.
Right.
I mean, it's human nature. I've done it. I've done this whole thing, but I've got this little habit that I've installed, which is to ask myself this question. But I also teach this question. It's. I mean, I'm in the business of teaching people how to think AI for a minute. The key to artificial intelligence is how to engineer a prompt that will get you the results you want. There's a whole industry now called prompt engineering, right? What I teach people is prompt engineering for the human mind, for human intelligence, which is way more powerful than artificial intelligence. Maybe it won't stay that way, but it is right now, if you know how to prompt your own brain. And this question, the one we started with, is really at the center of that. It always, I mean, whenever you can't think, if you don't know what to do, you can still ask the question because your brain tries to answer it. Questions are like a vacuum in the brain. Nature abhors a vacuum. Your brain will work on this question even if you get distracted by something else. You could be in the shower the next day and go, that's the answer right there. And it pops into your head.
How did you arrive at this, Keith? How did you arrive at trying to ask that question and trying to teach others? What happened?
Well, so I'm a success junkie. I've been studying success masters my entire adult life, from Socrates to Earl Nightingale, Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Tony Robbins, Dan Sullivan, James Clear. These are people who get it, who are smart, who are what I think of as virtual mentors. And I've learned so much from so many different people. So somewhere along the line, I said, you know what? It would be so cool because I struggled. This is years ago. I struggled with goal setting. Hated to set goals. I knew I needed to do it. I knew how powerful they were, but it was like that takes all the spontaneity out of life. I don't want to do that. Don't want to be committed to some goal. And then I was in the shower one day, literally in the shower, and I had this idea. And I said, you know what? It would be so cool. I think I'd probably just seen the movie Aladdin or something. I said, it would be so cool if you could set a goal the same way as you can make a wish. Just make a wish and it would happen. And it was one of those aha moments. It was like lightning, from above. And it's like, wait a minute. Setting a goal is exactly like making a wish, except that you're your own genie. And I started thinking about that. I got so excited about it. I almost slipped in a bar of soap, jumped out of the shower, dripping wet, grabbed a pad of paper and a pen I always keep wherever I am so I can write down ideas, and started writing down this framework called the Magic Lamp Framework, which is about how to set goals for people who hate setting goals, of which I was one. So that became a book. And it was a very successful book. And I used what I was writing about to write the book. I used what I was writing about to get it published by a big publisher. It was great. And I used this for years. And then got into, a middle age kind of moment. And I was like, I want more than incremental success, because that's what I was doing. I would say, how do I improve this by 20%, 30%? I want more than that. I want extraordinary. And how do I get that? And I didn't have an answer for that. I didn't know how to get to that level. So I went back into my favorite success masters and started researching this all over again. And I said, is there something I'm missing? And it turns out all of these people, I mean, all of them, base what they do on a certain type of question. And it's so powerful that I started thinking of it as magic questions. In fact, it became the heart and soul of my own teaching and my own life. I went out and trademarked I have a registered trademark on magic questions, on the term, because it's so powerful. Now, nobody else calls them magic questions. That's okay. It doesn't matter what they call them. It just matters that at the heart of what somebody's teaching you, they're going to always start asking you or giving you questions to ask yourself that will change your life. So this became another book, and then another book after that. And questions became the heart of everything. And then that led to the latest book, which is 10X Superpower, How to Make the Impossible Easy. Because I realized that I didn't know I was in this business, but I'm in the business of helping people achieve the impossible. And that's what the new book and the new coaching program is about.
It's fascinating, Keith, that you were at LinkedIn. You left LinkedIn, then you went to Lynda, which was an educational platform. And then Lynda was acquired by LinkedIn, and then Microsoft acquired them. You kind of ran the whole gambit there. What was that journey like? Did I get that right?
It actually started with Lynda. I spent virtually my entire career, a couple of little hiccups, but virtually my entire career in startup environments, because I love startups. I love entrepreneurs. I love being an entrepreneur. And so I joined Lynda they were a very small company. And I joined, they were in the online training space before it was a big thing. But it seemed to me like the next big thing is what it amounted to. And I love finding the next big thing and trying to be part of it. So I joined them to create a new team to sell to a new market segment that they wanted to enter. And I was there several years. It was successful. It was great, wonderful group of people, and an incredible product. And then LinkedIn bought them.
Right.
So I started out in this little tiny company, ended up in this huge company. I'm not really comfortable in huge companies. So I was ready to leave, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. It's like, okay, I can, money talks.
Stick around. Yeah.
Yeah. So and they were doing good stuff. They said, we're going to let this organization run itself the way it's run itself. And they largely did that. And so that was cool, and that was fun, and it was a new thing for me because now I'm inside the belly of the beast, right? Never been there before, just a little tiny person in this huge thing, and that was a different perspective. I learned a lot from that. And then Microsoft bought LinkedIn. Now I'm in one of the largest companies in the world. I think at one point they went over, $2 trillion or something. They had the highest market cap in the world at one point. And I'm in the middle of this thing, a little tiny little place down
Wow.
here. But I know what a little fish feels like when it gets eaten by a bigger fish, which then gets eaten by a bigger fish. So that was a neat perspective. Again, I immediately said, I'm not going to stay here. I don't want to be part of a huge company. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I stayed there for probably 4 or 5 years, and then
Wow.
realized, it's time for me to go back to what I love, which is entrepreneurial environment. And I said, start your own company, do your own thing. This is what you've always wanted to do. You work with other people, but it's usually been their dream, not mine. They bring me on board. I was in sales and I was pretty good at it. So they would bring me on board to sort of be the hired gun to create a sales department, that kind of thing. I did that over and over and over again with a bunch of different companies. And I said, wait a minute, you want to do your own thing? You're essentially unemployable as a person because you're so
Me too.
you're so confident in what you think is right, and you're so loud about it that you would be a lousy person to have as an employee. And so I just decided, I'd do my own thing. So that was about 4 years ago. So then I wrote 2 more books because I love to write and I love to take ideas and see them appear on page. It's just magic to me. And then I said, what I really want to do is coach this. I want to teach this. And I'd done public speaking and online training and all kinds of stuff for years. But I said, I want to create a program that's like nothing else that's ever existed before. And that's what I want to offer people. So that's how I ended up here. And I'm having, surprise, surprise, I'm working harder than I've ever worked in my life. And I'm loving it. I'm having an absolute ball. I can't wait to get up in the morning.
Keith, how was goal setting and, completing the goal and watching milestones? How was that done and achieved at Linda, then at LinkedIn, then at Microsoft? Was it different?
So stepping back, I've always had my own idiosyncratic version of this ever since I wrote that book and started living what I put in the book. So I had my own approach to setting goals. The sort of the corporate approach wasn't wildly different.
I see.
It's just that the thing that they never got, I think this is what makes me unemployable, right? Is big companies impose goals upon you. And my way of looking at goals is it has to come from you. If it's not your goal, then where's the passion? How can it be, how can there be anything real to that if it's not something you want to happen? Now, if somebody imposes a goal on you, you can certainly make that your goal and say, okay, here's my quota, right? That's the classic way that big companies think. Here's my team's quota, my quota, whatever. I will now make that my goal and go after it.
Right.
But that was never my goal. It was just their goal that I had to piggyback on, right? So it didn't have the authenticity that waking up in the morning and saying, you know what? This is what I want to do with my life, or this is what I want to do with this piece of my life, or this is what I want to achieve. And that's, again, you're a discipline of discipline, right? You know how important that is. If there's passion driving it, it makes all that other stuff so much easier. If you know why you are doing something, and how important it is to you, getting up in the morning is not a problem. Getting to whatever you need to be getting to do is not a problem. And it becomes less discipline and more passion. And if you've figured out what I call your joy strengths, the things that you are so good at that you love doing them, and you love doing them so much, you're good at them. So it's like this joy circle, right? And we all have these things, the kinds of things that you would do for free, right? I would do this, if I wasn't getting paid for it, which is how I define writing, for example. I love to write. It's great to get paid for it too, but I love to write. And when you figure out what you love that much, and then you incorporate that in your workday, it's not a workday anymore, is it? It's like, wow, I can't wait to get up and have fun today. And then you're doing your best work. And then you get into this whole team building thing where you think, okay, I need to, and I teach all this in my new book. You get into this thing where you think, okay, I get to do what I love, which is cool. I need this other stuff done that I don't really care about, and put any label on it you want. Maybe it's bookkeeping, maybe it's HR, maybe it's marketing, whatever piece, you can do it, but you're not really good at it. You're not passionate about it. It's just, I got to do it, but I'd rather somebody else do it.
Hmm.
So find somebody who's passionate about that. Find somebody for whom that is their joy strength. I think of it as casting a movie. You think of the role you want to fill, and then you think of the actor who will fill that role. Somebody who will show up in character every day. They just can't wait to be that actor, to do that thing. Then that becomes what I call a who. Your who to do this, whatever this task is. And thinking this way, I call who thinking, or the power of who. And I didn't invent this. I got a lot of this stuff from a guy named Dan Sullivan, who's a brilliant entrepreneurial coach, has written a book on it, a couple of books on it. But it really changes your life and your perspective when you say, okay, I'm going to do what I love, and I'm going to surround myself with people who do what they love. And it's Katie bar the door at that point. It's unstoppable.
Yeah, I think I gotta kind of reframe the term goal. Like, so I do some consulting with Microsoft, and when the current CEO there, Satya Nadella, makes, fiscal year, I believe, starts July, and he kind of makes his annual announcements, and he kind of states the kind of goals for the year.
Yep.
And now I know that in order for my contracts to go through, I've got to reshape them based on what his goals are in order to get that work. But
Yep.
that's really not goal setting at my point. That's really just trying to get a contract. I mean, it's
Yep.
not, it's more of a pursuit, I would believe, than a goal. Where do you stand on SMART goals?
Define it for me. What do you mean by SMART goals?
Simple, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely.
So, now that you say that, I've heard that acronym. That's not my world. There's some good stuff in there. Timely, simple. Those are great, powerful things. I have a different model that I call the LAMP model. And at the heart of this is, you want to take realistic and put it out the door, because we've been taught our whole lives to be realistic, to not strive too much because you'll be disappointed, that kind of thing. At least that's what I was brought up to believe. Don't dream too big because you'll just be disappointed. And that's a bunch of crap. That we sell ourselves short. And what my new book and the teaching I do, the book, by the way, I charge $10,000 for this book. I don't know if I shared that with you or not. First person I know of to charge $10,000 for a book, and that's batshit crazy. I'm sorry. It's just, it makes no sense, except, and you realize, wait a minute, if your immediate reaction is this makes no sense, then the book's not going to do you any good at any price, right? But if you say, wait a minute, what's the subtitle of this book? How to Make the Impossible Easy. Well, that's got to be worth something, right? And we've all had $10,000 books in our lives. We just didn't pay that much for them. Maybe we got them for free, or paid $20 for them or something. But they were worth way more than $10,000 to us. So I'm essentially announcing the value up front. And then what I'm doing is the exact opposite of what most people in the coaching world do. I'm including a coaching program for free. And most people do the opposite. They'll try to give you something up front, some content, a book or something, and then they try to sell you an expensive coaching program in the back end. And I never felt terribly authentic doing that. It was like, yeah, why don't we just let the other shoe drop up front, right? Why don't we not make anybody wary and just say up front, this is the cost. It's 10 grand. It's for a book. And oh, by the way, you also get this spectacular coaching program that comes with it. And in that, I teach, it's all about the impossible. It's how to normalize impossible, because we've all achieved the impossible in our lives over and over and over. and we never give ourselves credit for it. We don't think we're doing that. I'll give you an example. You think of a kid crawling around on the carpet. He's trying to learn how to walk. It's physically impossible for him to walk. It's emotionally impossible. It's psychologically impossible. But by God, he's going to walk. And he keeps doing it, keeps trying until he walks. And then pretty soon he's running. What was impossible is now easy. Okay, you say, well, that's an infant. That doesn't count. That's not real. I say, okay, how about when you learn to talk? Oh, how about when you learn to read? Learn to write? Yeah, but again, I was a kid, blah, blah, blah. Okay, how about when you learn to ride a bike?
But those things aren't really impossible, though.
Oh, they are impossible at first. That's the thing. They aren't impossible in retrospect because you did them. But looking forward, and it's a valid question, but looking forward, I had 3 older brothers. They'd ride around the neighborhood. I was on training wheels falling over, skidding my elbow. It was impossible to learn how to ride a bike for me, but I was going to ride a bike. And then I did. And now, as the joke goes, I couldn't forget how to ride a bike if I wanted to, right? It became easy. So you say, okay, well, none of that stuff really counts. Let's do something a little closer to home. Was there ever a time in your life when you were earning 10 times less than you are now? And, you ask that question and everybody goes, of course. I was mowing lawns or I was delivering papers or something like that. I made $1 an hour or whatever it was. And now I make a whole lot more. And if you went back to that person, what you're making now would seem impossible. It would be just beyond the pale. And yet here you are, you've done it. So this is what I mean by we do this. It's programmed into us, but we don't give ourselves credit. We find ways to say, well, that doesn't count or that doesn't count. And if you take these, what I call rites of passage, because we all have experiences similar to this. Driving a car is another thing you could add to the list. If you say, okay, those are cool, start thinking about, and this is one of those magic questions you can ask yourself, what have I done in my life that was impossible when I committed to it? And you'll come up with stuff. You'll amaze yourself what you come up with, and you'll realize how much you grew from when you started to when you finished. There's something in the human being that allows us to commit to something that we know we can't do. That's what I mean by impossible. And then, and by impossible, all we're really saying is I can't do it. It's beyond me. I don't have the capability. And what I ask people is, okay, what if you added capabilities? And it's the weirdest thing. People go, wow, it never occurred to me before. So I say this is impossible because I don't have the capability. What if I added the capability? And the capability doesn't have to be a skill that you acquire. It could be a who. It could be somebody that you bring into your life. If you find somebody who has a capability you need and you start collaborating with them, you've expanded your capability way more than just 2 people, because there's this whole synergistic thing going on. Now it's more than the sum of its parts. And that 2 people can be 5 people or 50 people or 5,000 people. There are 8 billion people on the planet. There's a huge talent pool. All you have to do is learn how to grow your capabilities, either by growing something in yourself or by adding the capabilities of others. And then the impossible becomes possible. And that's the theme. So that's a long-winded answer to your question. One of the first things I throw out in that SMART model is the realistic part. I don't want people to think realistic. If they're thinking realistic, they're not going to be a good client of mine, because I want people to reach way beyond realistic. There are reasons for that. We can get into that. I don't want to just keep rambling. But there's some real benefits to focusing on impossible goals that you don't get when you focus on regular goals.
How far are you taking this impossible thing, Keith? I mean, it's impossible for me to go to Jupiter. No matter who I employ, no matter what money I have, no matter what resources are available, it's not possible. So, I mean, how far do you take it?
Well, again, so what I'm saying is the the impossible, when we say impossible, we're really saying I don't have the capability to do that, right? Um, so my response to you, if somebody asks me that, and I get asked questions like that frequently, is that something you really want to do? Is that at the top of your list? I mean, would you would you essentially commit your entire life and years of your life, because that's how long it would take to get there, um, to do that? And if not, then what does it matter? It's not on the list, right? I'm not suggesting. Here's another example. Can you be at two places in the same time? No, that's against the physical laws of the universe. I'm not suggesting that kind of impossible. What I'm suggesting is, where in your life is there something you would really like to do, but you don't think you can do it? You don't think you have it in you to do it. That's what I mean by impossible. Because when you say, I can't do this, meaning I can't do this thing, I'm not capable of it, you're telling yourself this is impossible for me.
Hmm.
You're not making a statement about the physical universe. You're saying, for me, this is impossible. I had a guy the other day who was, we were talking on this same topic, and he said, well, I'd love to play in the NBA. I can't play in the
Yeah, there
NBA.
you go.
And, this is a guy he's probably 45. And I said, is that a goal you'd really set for yourself now at 45? Is that really how you would choose to spend your time? And he thought about it, and he said, no, of course not. I said, then it's a moot point. What I'm talking about are things that matter to you, not just, oh, what can I think of that is really truly impossible? And we can all think of dozens of things, thousands of things, but we wouldn't commit to them because they wouldn't be worth whatever the commitment would be, right? And on the other hand, there are things much closer to home. Okay, NBA sounds great. I'd love to be in the NBA. Probably a little bit old for it. Not going to set that
Probably.
as a goal. Why would I do that, right? So, but there are a whole lot of things shy of that I could set as a goal. I could become a reporter. I mean, if basketball really were that important to me, I could become a reporter on professional teams. Start
Press.
with high school teams, work my way up. A photographer, a videographer. I could make films. There's so many things I could do related to that if that was something I wanted to commit to, and I don't know that that it is. I'm just throwing that out. So this is really, I'm trying to get people to get their blinders, take
Mm,
their blinders
mm,
off.
mm.
You gave some dramatic examples, Jupiter, right? But what stops us much closer to home, we think of something just kind of in a fleeting moment. Oh man, I'd really like to do that, and then we think, no, I can't do that. That I would never be able to do that. And then we ignore it. We go on to the next thing. And what I'm saying is, stop ignoring it. Listen to yourself. You'd be amazed at what you come up with. And then what happens? So this is the part. This is the part where the goal itself changes you,
Mm.
and why impossible goals are so important. If you set a regular goal, let's say you set a goal to grow your business by 20% in the next year. That's reasonable, realistic, reachable, could easily be a SMART goal. And you set that goal. And you start thinking, now, what are some of the ways I can make that happen? And there are probably 1,000 things you could do to make that happen. Little incremental things, all kinds of different techniques. Well, what if you said, I want to grow my business by a factor of 10x, because that's the title of the book, the 10x superpower. And I use 10x interchangeably with impossible just as a way to quantify it, as a shorthand, right? We're really talking about impossible goals. If you really believed it was possible to grow your business by 10x in a year, I would say you're not being ambitious enough. Pick a higher number. Put another zero on it, right? That kind of thing. But if you say, okay, I'd love to grow my business by 10x, but there's no way in the world I can do it. The market won't sustain it. I don't have enough people. I don't have the capital. I just can't do it. Now that becomes an interesting goal, because if you choose to commit to that, even though you can't do it, I mean, you're convinced you can't do it. And you're right, by the way. and then you commit to it, things change. Your brain starts changing. So you got these 1,000 things that you could do to make incremental progress. It all comes down now to what, 1, 2 things you could do to make 10x progress, to grow your business by 1,000%. Suddenly, everything else is noise. And then you found the signal in the noise. And part of this process is understanding how to find the signal in the noise, because it's a very busy world. And it seems like all, whether 5-6 billion people on connected devices today, it seems like they're all trying to get our attention at the same time sometimes. I mean, it's maddening. So how do you separate the signal from the noise? Bang, you set an impossible goal, and suddenly you're focused on just what this is. And then you start thinking differently. You actually change yourself. You transform yourself because of this goal. We think, it's another thing I thought for many, many years. I always thought that we figured out what we wanted, then we created a goal, right? And it's the exact opposite. Our goals create us. It's what we want that then defines who we become. The future you create is what creates your present. It's not the other way around. And once I understood that, this whole idea of the impossible began to make sense. Because if you're thinking about an impossible future, you've completely changed your present, because now you're thinking differently, you're acting differently. And here's the other tidbit that blows people's minds. What got you here won't get you there. What got you to where you are in your life will not get you 10x. It can't. You can't work 10 times harder. You can't, there aren't 10 times more hours in the day. It won't get you there.
It's impossible.
It's impossible, but impossible in the sense of I have to change what I've been doing, right? What I've been doing, it's impossible for what I've been doing to get me to where I want to go. So I do something different, and suddenly it's possible. And that's really the switch I'm trying to flip in people's brains. If you start changing how you think and who you are and your capabilities, suddenly all these things you thought were impossible are possible.
Yeah, so I struggle with this. So if you don't want to like the term, you don't like the term impossible, not possible. My deepest fear, of course, my deepest fear is harm coming to loved ones. So it would be impossible, not possible for me to make sure that doesn't happen. I could do small things, but I can't control. I can't control where they are. I can't control what happens to them. So it's like, who decides what's impossible and not possible when you're setting these goals?
Well, so if a goal, an overriding goal, a goal that you would be willing to commit all the wood to one arrow for,
sure,
would be to keep harm from coming to people you love. That would be your primary goal.
Sure.
At some level, you know that these people
won't
last forever, right? They're not immortal. So you know that. So your goal, it doesn't make any sense to say I want to make them immortal, because there is no such thing. But you say, okay, how can I protect them as long as they're on this planet? That's not an impossible goal. It's not something you could fail at it. I'm not suggesting when you go after an impossible goal that you won't fail. You'll probably fail multiple times. You'll keep coming up short. But let's go back to revenue for a second, because it's so easy to visualize, so easy to measure. Yours is a little bit tougher, but we can get
very easy to measure revenue. Very easy.
It really is. So let's say you want to you want to increase the revenue of your company by 10 times, 1,000%, and then put a date on it, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. Let's say you want to do that.
That's a smart goal.
Okay, so you commit to that, but it has to be enough of a goal in my world, the way I teach this. It has to be enough of a goal that you really don't believe you can do that. You really believe it's beyond you, but you want it. You want it so much you're ready to commit to it. So whatever that number is, I put 10x on it because that's easy for people to understand.
Round number.
Maybe it's 100x, but whatever. So you put that goal on it. That's your goal. And then you start, you commit to that goal. And you start changing how you spend your day, because remember, what got you here isn't going to get you there. So there have to be some changes in here. So you start changing how you think, you start changing what you do, you bring some who's in, you start doing all these things differently. And then whatever your deadline is, a year, 2 years, 3 years, that deadline happens and you fall short of your goal. You're only at 800% growth. Is that a bad thing? The idea of setting this impossible goal, two things happen. One, it creates what I call the impossibility effect. It's a filter on everything you think from that point forward. You now are, you get up in the morning and you think, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And then you say, wait a minute, is that going to help me achieve this impossible goal? No. Okay, then I'm not going to do that thing. I'm going to do something else. So it starts changing you from the moment you commit to the goal. If you don't reach the actual goal, that's irrelevant. The achievement is not the payoff. The payoff is the growth. And this is me talking, because I think growth is the ultimate thing we do as human beings. It's the ultimate opportunity we have. It's the ultimate reward, and it's the ultimate way we can contribute to the world. So it's all about growth to me. I sincerely believe if you're not growing, you're dying. I know that's an old saying,
Yeah.
but if you're not growing, you're dying. And guess what? I add this to that saying: you get to choose. You get to choose which one you're doing. So I choose growth. So when you set an impossible goal and you start making all these changes, you start adding capabilities. Maybe you learn a new skill. Maybe you hate public speaking and you learn public speaking just for now. Or maybe you hire or collaborate with a who's great at public speaking as the face of your organization. Whatever you choose to do, you add capabilities. Now you start adding these capabilities and you start making these achievements. When you're done, whatever your deadline is, a year, 2 years, 3 years, the number you hit doesn't matter. What matters is your growth. Think of all the capabilities you've brought to this. You have become somebody who is able to do this thing. Again, I say, what if it's only 800%? Well, were you somebody who could have grown your business by 800% a year ago? Probably not. You've changed you. You've committed to growing into that person. And really, a commitment to an impossible goal is a commitment to growth. And let me sweeten the pot here. I would guess only 1 in 100 people, and this is not scientific, this is just anecdotal based on the people I've met over the years. Only 1 in 100 people is ready to make this kind of commitment. Because once you understand that this goal, that what got you here won't get you there, and you realize I got to change some stuff in my life, got to change how I think. Not everybody's ready to commit to that. And the weird thing is, and this is mind-blowing too, when you commit to a 10x goal, it's actually easier than what you're doing now. And that's because you are so focused and you are so into building capability that your time isn't spent with this 1,000 other details that you could be doing that don't really produce anything for you. We spend our lives lost in the noise, most of us. And this focus on the impossible goal gets to the signal. And when you focus on the signal, life becomes a whole lot easier. Everything becomes easier.
So you're saying you set these kind of not possible goals, knowing that you may not achieve them, but getting you there makes you grow, looks at things differently, and that's part of the whole process.
Yeah, you set a goal. You really commit to growing into the person for whom this impossible goal is possible. That's really what it comes down to.
And so when you're working with someone and you're trying to define one of these impossible goals, who puts the guardrails up? Do you say, oh, let's not do that, let's shape it here?
No, it's not my journey. What I do is I'm one of those infuriating coaches who doesn't have any answers. I just have questions. And what I try to do is teach people questions that help them find their own answers, because everybody has a different answer. I'm always amazed at the variability of the human species. I mean, I go into a restaurant and somebody's eating something that would make me throw up, right? but they love it. I don't love it. Why is that? I don't know. I don't care. People are people. Somebody who's listening to music that I can't stand to listen to. They can't stand to listen to the music I listen to. Somebody's espousing political or religious views that I can't live with, but they're perfectly happy with it. This is human nature. This is what we do, and to me, it's a beautiful thing. I'm stunned by how many different points of view there are in the world, and everybody's coming from a different place. That's all good, and what I teach is to embrace that, to celebrate that, because at the heart of what will make this work, what will make an impossible goal work, is that it's your goal, right? Remember, you asked me about how things were different at LinkedIn or Microsoft. I was never working on my goals. I was working on their goals. I had to make their goals my goals, which is fine. It works. It's the way business works in most situations. But it's not your goal. Imagine how much passion and energy and possibility you would bring to something that is your goal. And that then, and really only your goal, it becomes a unique goal because it's so powerful and you're so focused on it. So that makes a difference, makes a huge difference.
If somebody comes to you with a truly impossible goal, I want to be in two places at once, I want to make sure no harm comes to my loved ones, how can you possibly work with somebody with that unrealistic goal?
Well, I've never had anybody commit to a goal like that. I mean, what's the point? That if they're trying to understand, trying to wrap their brain around what I mean by impossible, then they've come up with an example of something that I don't consider an impossible goal. It's not a goal. It's just something somebody can identify as.
But it's not up to you. You say you don't put up the guardrails. It's not
I
up to
don't.
you. It's
I
up to
don't.
them.
I don't. But I've never had anybody do that. I mean, again, it's. You mentioned Jupiter. Top of mind, first thing you mentioned was Jupiter because it was easy to identify that as physically impossible right now. I mean, if you had Jeff Bezos money, you couldn't go to Jupiter, right? Right now. And maybe not for 100 years. Nobody knows. Would you spend your life on that goal? No. But then you thought about a goal that mattered to you, keeping the people you care about safe.
Yeah.
Well, that's something you can make huge progress on. Ultimately, you can't protect them from everything. You
Right.
know that.
Right.
You certainly can't make them immortal. You know that. But you can sure protect them from a whole hell of a lot that could happen to them. And if you focus on that, you're not focusing on the impossibility. I mean, it's impossible. Just pick it, define it however you want so that
Right.
you think, I can't really do this, but I'm committed to it anyway. And then watch what happens when your brain starts focusing on it. Then watch what happens as you add capabilities. And if the end result is protecting those you love, suddenly you're providing protection that you were never doing before. Is it perfect? No. Will you fail? Yes. But you're making progress on something that you're passionate about. And you've taken off. If there were blinders on there before because you thought I can't do that, it's impossible. Now the blinders are gone. It's like, well, shit, I can do a whole lot, and I'm gonna do a whole lot. And now you're doing that. You're committed to a goal that you chose. So I never talk somebody down from a goal. It's not my journey. The coaching program I offer will help them put in place things that will add capabilities to them so they can reach their impossible goal. That's my role in this, to help them there aren't any shortcuts per se, but to make it easier, to help them do some things that I had to do some trial and error on for a few years, to help them do those quickly. And what comes out of that process is a goal that they believe is truly beyond them, but it's something you really want, right? Maybe you want to be in two places at the same time. I don't know. Maybe if you want to be at the Super Bowl and, on a cruise in the Caribbean, maybe, but people, I don't want to use the word realistic, but that's sort of what I'm driving for. People choose goals that make sense for them. They don't believe they're they're capable of doing it when they start. They commit to it anyway, but it makes sense because they see their life having achieved this goal as a whole lot better than it is right now. What I think of as a 10x improvement. Another advantage of talking in the terms of 10x, you can put a label on that and say, imagine your business 10 times larger. Imagine your health 10 times better. Imagine your relationships 10 times better. Imagine those you love 10 times safer, right? These are all things that are within your ability to imagine, not necessarily do, but imagine. And then once you imagine them and you realize how much you want it, you commit to it, even though you know you can't do it. And then suddenly, the weird thing is people stop thinking it's impossible pretty quickly. I sort of don't want to tell people that up front because it almost feels like you're cheating. You set this impossible goal. You focus like you've never focused before. All the noise goes away. It's pure signal. You start changing how you think, what you do. You install new habits, and you get into this. And 2 months later, it doesn't seem impossible anymore. It's almost like a letdown. It's like, I'm actually going to do this. Yeah, you are. But you weren't 2 months ago, right? So you've already grown to the point, because that's the first point, right? You've grown to the point where you realize, I don't think it's impossible anymore. I still want it, still committed to it. It's like climbing a mountain. Your point of view changes. You look up at the mountain, it's like, crap, how am I going to do this? You get halfway up the mountain, you look around and say, wow, this view is incredible. And I've only got, half as far to go now. Your view changes. Everything changes. It's the same thing when you commit to an impossible goal and you make a little progress and you start adding capabilities. And it's like, wow, ain't impossible anymore. And I do try to sort of rein in a little bit because it's very easy to get to that point and say, well, I wasn't ambitious enough. So my 1,000% growth for my business, it needs to be, 1,000,000%. And it's like, yeah, you can do that if you want, but why not follow what you committed to? This was a legitimately impossible goal. Why don't you achieve that goal? Then you have a reference experience for the next impossible goal, because really what you're creating is a platform for yourself. If you're adding capabilities, if you're growing, then the person you are when you've grown into someone who can achieve your impossible goal is way different than you were at the beginning. And guess what? You can now make another impossible goal based on this new person. And your new your new launching pad. I mean, it's like going to Jupiter, right? Your launching pad is now Mars, right? That's a whole lot easier. So that's how the process works, and the thinking changes as you go through the process.
So this way, the subject or the owner of the goal feels slight victories, even how small or large or incremental they are, but they do change their perspective, and that's the whole goal of the exercise: to have them grow and change perspective and get closer to things that they didn't think they could.
Yes, absolutely. That's a big part of it. And you actually touched on something that I want to bring into the discussion, because my book is 10 breakthroughs, right? Each individual breakthrough it's a shift in mindset. Really, it's a reframe. There are all kinds of psychological terms you can throw at it, but you leave thinking differently than you started, which is where everything begins, with what you think. So these 10 breakthroughs are life-changing. Any one of them can profoundly change your life. You put them all together, and that's where you get this 10x superpower, because you're working on all cylinders. It's like a 10-cylinder engine at that point. But one of the breakthroughs is called choosing the value over the void. And it comes down to this, and you just touched on it. If you're engaged in a project, do you focus on where you have to get, or do you focus on how far you've come? And most people, I spent years doing this. I was never happy with whatever I achieved. It didn't matter what I achieved, because it was always somehow short of the ideal. You ever feel that way? It's like I imagined something and I've never reached that. It was always on the horizon, and you never get to the horizon. So whatever I achieved, I mean, my first book I wrote, I hated to write when I was in school. Hated it. Got out of school, fell in love with writing. Go figure. So writing a book was a miracle to me.
Hmm.
I did it. You think I'd celebrate that, right? Instead of that, I said, gee, I've written this book. How do I find an agent? It's almost impossible to find an agent for a first-time author that nobody's ever heard of. I found an agent. You think I'd celebrate that? Nope. I started worrying about, I wonder if this agent can sell this to a big publisher. Nobody knows me. I don't have a mailing list. And then they sold it to one of the biggest publishers on the planet. And by then I was worrying about the next thing. I never stopped to give myself a moment to appreciate how far I'd come. So what I teach people is measure your progress looking backward, never forward. There's nothing to measure looking forward. You haven't done anything. All there is disappointment, overwhelm, frustration, unhappiness. That's why I call it the void. Looking backward, you can say, okay, where was I when I started? Where am I now? And you see all this goodness. It's like, wow. And give yourself a pat in the back, because that's your energy source for going forward. When you realize I don't have to wait to be happy. I want my business to be, 10 times larger in a year, whatever. I don't have to wait a year to feel great about the progress I'm making, because I'll be changing all along, right? I'll add a who. Yay. I'll add a new capability. Yay. I've focused on doing things differently. So I've now decided to reorient my business in a completely new way. Yay. Those are all things that you've done to help you reach this goal that's still in the distance, but you're enjoying it now. You're enjoying the journey. You're not waiting to get to the end. You're enjoying the ride. So that's a really important breakthrough for a lot of people. And it's in there because it was such a huge breakthrough for me. Maybe other people aren't burdened by this, but I was really burdened by it. I missed a lot of years where I was just miserable. And by the way, there's another breakthrough that I call remixing or remastering the past. It's like remastering an album or a movie, where you get to look at your past in a new light, from a new perspective, and you realize how powerful it is and how much learning there is that you missed because you've been all upset, or you've assigned a meaning to your past that belongs to you. The meaning belongs to you. You can change the meaning. People think, oh, I can't change my past. No, you can't change your past. You can change what you think about your past. And that becomes an incredibly powerful exercise in and of itself. And you put these two things together, this idea of looking at the progress you made, the growth, and then you take that into the past and you say, wow, when I did this thing, even though it was, maybe it was a painful experience, when I did this thing, I changed. I learned all this stuff. I made all these new connections. And then you start realizing how rich your past is in terms of fuel for where you want to go in the future. And a lot of us sell that short. I did.
Keith, what in recent history, be it large or small, have you changed your mind on?
Oh, now that's a great question. What in recent history have I changed my mind on?
Could be something very small, doesn't have to be large, anything. Have you changed your mind on anything in the last
I
month?
guess
months?
I don't think in those terms. I don't have an answer for that, because I I tend not to change my mind about evaluating history unless it's personal history. So if that's an allowable category, I change my mind about what happened to me all the time, because I find a more useful frame for it. So I will encounter something I didn't expect, and my experience of it is unpleasant. And then I will change my mind about it, because I will start asking myself magic questions about it. Like, what did you learn from that? How can you prevent that from happening again? Two incredibly powerful questions. Write down the answers. And now suddenly this thing that, punched you in the face is empowering you. You've learned from it.
Right.
I had one of my favorite bosses, one of my first colleagues, a mentor, said, I never had any education I didn't have to pay for.
Hmm.
And I've always loved that because the point he was making is, okay, you screwed up. This is painful. What'd you learn from it? You paid a price for what you learned. Okay, that's that's what the universe does. That's what you get out of life. So that was a good learning moment for me. And so I change how I think of experiences. It doesn't have to be just a recent experience, by the way, and it doesn't have to be a minor experience. It could be major. It can be way in the past. It can be a month ago. That happens a lot. That's very fluid in my brain because I'm always trying to get my past, the meaning I assigned to my past, to serve me better.
Hmm. Yeah, you reframed an experience. What a fascinating take on that question. Thank you,
Yep.
Keith. So I started my business in the 90s and I was working way too hard. Like you talked about, you're working more now than you ever did
Yeah.
when you were employed. And by the way, I'm virtually unemployable too for 30
Yep.
years, and putting personal health way in the back, Keith. So I was eating poorly. I was working late at night. It was pizza and soda. And before you know it, I'm up to 340 pounds. And the doctor says to me, if I don't lose the weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. My oldest was born at the time.
Yep.
So I spent the next 6, 7 months, lost about 130 pounds. And people want the quick answer. What's your secret? What's your secret? And there's no secret, Keith. You alluded to it earlier. How did I lose the weight and how did I keep it off, right? You can't look at, like you talk about goals. The goal isn't just crossing a finish line. You have to keep continuing and doing it. Discipline. I got routine. I got restraint. I got some direction, willpower, etc. How does discipline play a role in your life, Keith Ellis?
It's the centerpiece of my life, but
Really?
it sounds it's back to what we were talking about earlier. If you are focused on the right things you enjoy doing, or you've framed them in your mind to be so positive that you enjoy them,
Hmm.
um, then discipline is not a big deal.
Hmm.
It's not. I uh,
Hmm.
let me put it differently. I've never been particularly good at discipline, at self-discipline. There's this little thing that kicks in. Be interesting to hear if this ever happened to you in your journey that you just described. There's a little switch that clicks. If I say, "Okay, you're going to stop doing this," I'm like a 2-year-old.
Hmm.
I immediately go out and do it. It's like I can show you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not the boss of me. Wait a minute, we're the same person. These internal dialogues get really weird. But I've also learned that about me. So I've learned to frame. So I love to swim every day.
Good.
Swimming is an incredible aerobic thing,
Hmm.
um, cardio thing. But it's just fun to splash around in the pool like when
Hmm.
you're a kid.
Hmm.
And I'm lucky enough to have a competition pool not far away, so I can swim laps year round, any weather. So I start my day that way because, and that's not how I would choose to start my day, if it weren't so dang important to me
Hmm.
to. There's a window of opportunity when I can swim. That's why I start my day that way. If I could do the same thing at 4 in the
Exercise. Yeah.
afternoon, yeah, I'd probably do that. But it's so important to me, and I love doing it so much. It requires discipline. I have to go to bed at a certain time. I
Hmm.
have to get up at a certain time. I
Hmm.
do that 5 days a week, and then the weekend I give myself off. I end up doing other types of exercise because I like to exercise, but uh, I don't consider it discipline.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to escape your question.
Downplay it. Yeah.
I'm just not really good at discipline,
Hmm.
but I am pretty good at habits. And when I find a habit that serves me, I know how to make it a habit.
Hmm.
I know
Hmm.
how to do something in such a way that I don't feel right if I don't do it. Now, is that discipline? I don't know. I'm when I was a kid, I always wanted to learn how to play guitar, and I tried several times. And I had a couple of brothers who play guitar, and um, I would learn a chord or two. My fingers would hurt. It would be boring, um, and I just drop it. So I did this like 3 or 4 times. Then I got to college. One of my buddies, we were talking about this one day, and he was a music major, and we were talking about this, and I said, "Yeah, I'd love to learn how to play guitar, but I just don't seem to be able to." And he said, "Oh, I can teach you how to play guitar, guaranteed, in 30 days." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "All you have to do is play 20 minutes a day, every day for 30 days."
Hmm.
I said, okay, I can do that. And he said, but wait, if you miss a day, you start over.
Hmm.
So if you're at 25 days and you miss a day, you start again. And I didn't miss a day, but that was part of the idea, right? It's just
Right.
this little game he was playing with me, and ended up having a career as a music teacher. But he taught me this thing, and I said, "Wow!" And of course, I learned how to play guitar. Duh.
Hmm.
Um, and I started thinking about how I could apply that elsewhere in life, and it applies to almost any habit. You can probably do it in 15 days. But this neat little trick of is if you miss it, if you miss a day, you start over.
Hmm.
And all the goal starting out, and this is a short-term goal starting out, is to do these, do this 30 days. That's it. Because when you're done, it will be a habit. You will feel so weird if you don't do it that you'll just keep doing it.
Hmm.
And so you find things that you would like to make a habit. Maybe it's eating right. Maybe it's exercising. Maybe it's learning how to play guitar or some other skill, practicing a foreign language, but you do it every day. Doesn't have to be this huge commitment. 20 minutes was all it took. But that was a neat thing I learned from a guy I went to school with that I've used uh, for the rest of my life. And it always finds its way into a book.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think I put that story in like 3 books because I want people to understand how important habits are and how easy they are to program and deprogram, because
Hmm.
that's the other side of it. The way this obviously, the way to get rid of a bad habit is to replace it with another habit.
Hmm.
Because there's no way to just say I'm going to stop doing that
Right.
because you're it's already programmed. You just feel like crap. But if you replace it with another habit and you focus on that, it's like, oh, this is a whole lot easier than I thought it would be. And pretty soon, that's the new habit is taken over. So that's programming, human programming, in a way that is very profound.
And this ongoing thesis, Keith, that discipline is a spectrum of about 10 elements, and routine is one of them. And I think that's what you're describing right there.
That's exactly what I'm describing.
Yeah.
Routine is so important.
For control, order, direction, strictness. Yeah. There's no wrong answer to that question. There's no wrong answer to most questions, I believe. What motivates you, Keith?
So I have a personal mission statement, I guess you'd call it. It's the way I look at the world and what I'm doing here. Um, my objective, my mission in life, is to develop my potential by helping other people develop their potential.
Hmm.
Um, it's kind of like a twofer, but I I want to develop my potential. Again, like I said, I've been a success junkie my whole adult life.
Yeah.
I want to develop my potential, but not in a vacuum. If I learn something like this, my current book has these breakthroughs. They're in the book. I could have written a book that was 10 times larger,
Hmm.
but what's in the book are things that just bang, just slap me in the face, changed how I thought about the world. And it's like I want to share that. Now maybe they don't slap everybody, the readers in the face. That's okay, but it certainly had that effect on me. So what I'm trying to do is figure things out for me, if you will. And then if I find something that really works, I want to share that with somebody else to help them reach their potential. Because
Hmm.
that's the real win for me is it's not one or the other, it's both. The real win for me is growing and then helping other people grow. That's the win.
Impact.
Yep,
So,
it is. Impact.
being a success junkie and given that motivation, Keith, how do you measure success?
Well, I measure success by growth. That's sort of it, it's sort of implicit in all the stuff you and I've been talking about.
Hmm.
But I used to set goals that were just, okay, I want to sell this much because I was in sales for so many years,
Hmm.
or I want to take the company to this size, or I want to do this, that, and the other. And those are still valid goals, but I don't get juiced from achieving those. I get juiced from becoming the person who can achieve those. So the goals I set these days are the things I consider goals. I mean, you think of going to a grocery store and writing a list and picking up all the items on your list as goal setting. It's
Hmm.
classic goal setting. You write a
Hmm.
list. This is the stuff you want. You come home with it. And I use that as an example in my first book. We're all goal setters. We just don't realize it most of
Mm, mm,
the time. I think of goals in a larger sense. I want goals that create me. Back to this thing we were talking about earlier.
mm,
I have an idea of how I want to grow, so I create a goal that essentially induces me to grow. I won't say forces me to grow because it's up to me. I can stop at any time I want. It's choosing to grow, and maybe that's discipline. But growth is so intoxicating to me that it doesn't require discipline to want to grow, if that makes sense.
mm.
It's just it's like this is, I want to have more capabilities 10 years from now than I have today. 1 year from now than I have today. A month from now than I have today.
Mm.
That's just what I get off on. And if I can then teach that to someone else, that would be a win for me. So that's how I set goals.
Keith, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoy your perspective. This, I struggled with it as I'm researching you, and I'm glad we talked about it and kind of fleshed it out a little bit. Anybody listening, how can they get in touch with you?
So 2 places. The easiest, well, they're equally easy. KeithEllis.com is is the name of my company. It's also my website. So KeithEllis.com. But you can also go to 10x superpower, 10x superpower.com. And either place, you get a little narrative that sort of explains what this is about and explains this $10,000 book thing. But then you also get a chance to take a quiz. I call it the 10x readiness quiz. And it asks you some questions about you to see if you're ready to take this leap. Because remember, probably 1 in 100 are ready. So it's pretty easy to say, yeah, I'd like 10 times more money. That's easy. But are you committed to doing that and changing and all the other stuff that we've talked about? And again, 1 in 100, I'm guessing, are willing to do that. And you take this quiz, and if you hit a certain value on the quiz, then you're qualified. And then you would book what I call the discovery call with me. It's actually a coaching call. It's a free coaching call for a half an hour where we would start the coaching program. But the point of it is not a sales call, it's a coaching call, because at the end of it, I want the person I'm talking to decide whether they want to work with me or not. And I want to be able to decide, and you know exactly what I'm talking about here. I want to be able to decide whether I want to work with them, because life is too short to work with people you don't want to work with, either as clients or as vendors, right? So it's very important to have this match. And if we agree to work together, great, we move forward together. If we don't, that's cool too. Maybe if I've done my job right as a coach, this person gets something out of this session for free. And if they get if they get a lot, then they say, okay, I want to continue the coaching program, buy the book, blah, 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 blah. That's great. And if they don't, at least I've gotten that little bit of juice that I get when I help somebody along their journey.
Yeah, it helps your mission. Keith, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. If I'm ever in the greater DC, Baltimore area, maybe we get a cup of tea.
Hey, that'd be fun. I'd love that.
You be well. Have a good day.
All right, you too, man. See ya. Bye.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with 1 or 2 of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources, and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.